A lot of men have issues with smothering their wife. Now, that doesn't sound like something that happens all too often to the men who are a little more distant, a little bit more, kind of hands off. They can feel cold and emotionless in relationships. But if you ask around, especially the men who seem neurotic, who seem clingy, this is happening more and more with couples as the years go by. I've seen a shift where a lot more men are getting what's called anxious attachment style, as where, before it was predominantly women. It was usually a 70-30 split, women to men. Now it's changing, at least in my own anecdotal practice. And as a result, men have become a bit more smothering in relationships. So what I want to do in this video here is explain a few things. One, why smothering starts, recognizing the sign of it, right? So first of all, let's identify what smothering is. Secondly, we're going to try and unpack what the impact is on your wife, and then go into a little more detail as to why men smother, and then how to rectify it. How do you actually fix this issue in your relationship so that it's not such a big problem? So the first thing is to recognize the signs of smothering. So very simple. I usually like to think of it as three kind of categories to what constitutes smothering. First is overchecking. When you check in with your partner once a day, emotionally, how are things going, right? What you've been up to. Not only is that fine, that is a very healthy practice. If you don't check in once a day, if you do it only once a week, or you never do it, it can seem like you're quite the opposite, detached. But if you have somebody who is texting you, where are you, what you up to, what's going on, kind of incessantly throughout the day, that's going to get annoying, first of all. But second of all, it does kind of border on like, I don't have the space that I feel I need to kind of run my life without someone interjecting themselves into my daily routine. And that's not fair, right? So overchecking is a big one. Over planning, different, right? But it's a second thing, right? So over planning. So you have overchecking, and then you have over planning, which is dominating schedules. Now, what do I mean by dominating your wife's schedule or your girlfriend's schedule? There's an expectation on your part that she's involved in all of your activities, or for you to be involved in all of her activities. There is a healthy sense of separation that needs to happen within relationships. In fact, if you look at even some religious cultures, they build in these separations. There's the laws of family purity in the Jewish religion, where men and women take breaks for 2 weeks out of the month from any kind of physical contact. That is obviously a bit extreme for most people, but it just goes to show you that there is a concept of giving each other a healthy amount of space, so that it does a couple things. One, it kind of creates the craving for each other. And two, it gives you a sense of self-development, which is needed. Very often nowadays, I see this happening with couples who are financially successful, and they've either had a very successful exit to a company, or they've inherited a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of responsibilities and work. So what happens? They end up spending a tremendous amount of time with each other. And while that's fun for the first few weeks, few months, it does get a little grating. And so over planning can be smothering. And then the other thing is over inquiring. So it's a little different than over checking, right? So over checking is about where are you? What are you up to? Over inquiring is, what is going on in your head? How do you feel? What are you thinking of? There's that classic joke of women saying, what's on your mind, right? And men saying nothing. But it can go the other way. What are you thinking about? Again and again and again. You'll see and then if they don't get the answer they like, sometimes men will say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Because they're really looking for affection or connection, and when they don't get it, they don't like it. You'll see even this tactic with reporters, and it's annoying. I saw a Piers Morgan episode, who I usually generally think is quite good. He was asking someone who came on a question. The person answered the question. He didn't like the answer because it wasn't sufficient. He asked it 8 or 9 times. It's one of the most annoying interviews I've ever seen. So imagine that in your relationship again and again and again. That is a sign of smothering. Now, what does smothering do to your wife or to your girlfriend, right? The first one is it provides an emotional strain. It gives people, men or women, a sense of confinement. I mean, if you're overchecking all the time, it's like, I can't go anywhere. If you're over asking, if you're over inquiring, I can't even have my own thoughts. If you're over planning, I can't have my own time. So there's this feeling of restriction, and it's the opposite of freedom, right? You feel like you have handcuffs in the relationship emotionally, and it's not a good feeling. And that leads inevitably to the end of trust. And that's a big, big problem, because if someone is overchecking, you might not think it right away, but I promise you, eventually what happens is the person says, well, why are they checking on me all the time? Why are they asking? Because they don't trust me. And if there's no trust, that really is the beginning of the end of any relationship. And then the third part, which is something we talked about a little bit already in the signs of smothering, which is a loss of individuality, a loss of your identity. One thing that can happen, and you see this happen a lot when couples are in these instances where they're kind of thrown into a situation where they spend a lot of time together. So couples who work together, own a business together, and most recently, couples who got together and spend an exorbitant amount of time together during COVID. They become this new identity of a couple, and they lose a sense of self. And if you have a partner who's smothering, always asking where you are, what you're doing, what's on your mind, and expecting to be part of everything, there's this sense that I don't have an identity. I'm not who I thought I was. I don't know who I am. I feel lost in the relationship is something you'll hear quite often when someone is being smothered. So those are the impacts, and all three of those are bad news. Not only will they end relationships, but oftentimes when I see people who are coming out of a toxic relationship, getting a sense of who they are again takes time. It has real damage. Now, why do men smother? That is a great question that I've had people ask me, like, why am I like this, right? So once we get to the point where you can understand, yeah, I do that. Why am I like that? Understanding why you're like that is the precursor to changing that behavior, because you want to understand the root cause before you can assign some kind of a rectification. That's just natural, right? You're not going to get prescribed antibiotics if you have a virus. That's for bacterial infections. So you have to understand what the underlying cause is. So usually it's a fear of rejection. So if someone has a fear that their partner is going to suddenly become disinterested or doesn't really love them, or in the classic anxious attachment model, doesn't love them as much as they love their partner, they're going to be afraid that the relationship's going to go away. And so there's this smothering is kind of done as a means of control. They can't control the relationship. No one can control any relationship. So they figure, well, if I know where he is and I know what the men. So if I know where she is and what she's thinking, and if I'm always there with her, she won't leave me. And it actually has the diametric opposite effect. So fear of rejection is the main cause. You could feel also unworthy. You could feel insecure in the relationship. So if you have a low sense of self-esteem, or maybe if you feel like you're dating above your weight class, right? So if you come from kind of modest means and you have this gorgeous woman who's interested in you and she was born to multimillionaires and you're like, what's she doing with me? And you've never kind of processed the value that you bring into the relationship, which I'm sure there is if she's with you, then you're going to have this smothering feeling, again, connected to, I'm afraid I'm going to lose her. And again, control issues, so you can kind of, I've talked about it already, but it's all about the control, right? So not just about the fear of losing it, but there's some men have this idea of dominance in a relationship. And some cultures are a little bit more predisposed than others, where there's still this hierarchy of the man being in control and being the dominant one in the relationship. And I believe in leadership in relationships. And as a husband, I do believe that I lead my family, but it's not done with dominance. It's done with, I care enough to lead and lead by example and et cetera, all that kind of healthy leadership qualities. But if you have this sense of, I need to control her so that I know where she is and she doesn't violate any of my kind of unwritten rules, even if you kind of frame them in this idea of them being our rules or healthy rules, they're still not things that you should have to enforce. Rules in a relationship, in an adult mutual relationship that is mutually, consensual, the rules are there, and then people have a choice whether to follow them or not. If they don't follow them, you end the relationship. The answer isn't, if they don't follow them, I'm going to assert new boundaries and new protocols in place and new controlling measures to make sure they follow them. No, the idea is you volunteer to play by these rules, and if you don't, that's the end of the relationship. I can't control you. I can never control you. I can only ask and hope that you meet me halfway. So those are the reasons that men smother. Now, what is the answer? What is the solution? And this is always the hardest part, right? So we talk about why it happens. We talk about what it looks like. We talk about the impact. But now you have to kind of get through to the other side. And you have to actually have something of a relationship where you can be proud of it and it doesn't have that icky feeling of someone trying to, control the other person or do these things where it's uncomfortable and makes them feel like they don't even want to be in the relationship. So the first thing is to encourage independence. You want to support your wife or your girlfriend's interests, support her goals. And you don't have to be there every time, right? So I'll give you an example. My wife recently got her doctorate. She's a psychologist. And I could have checked in on her all the time. How's your school going? How are your grades going? But I didn't. I'm saying, hey, if you need any help, I'm here. I'm really proud of you. I think what you're doing is amazing, right? That's the way support sounds like. So you want to support that independence, that they're doing something that does not involve you and that you're proud that they're taking their life so seriously, or that they're exploring hobbies or career goals or whatever it is. The second one is to communicate openly. Surprise, surprise. This kind of goes with every single, counseling issue, is that there's not enough communication. It's rarely the case that someone is over communicating. Because over communication is just, okay, I get it, it's annoying, but it doesn't create a huge rift. I mean, that's a really rare case. You could be that you're communicating a lot, but you're communicating ineffectively. So you're not talking about the root issues. So what you have to do is learn how to communicate why you're concerned, so that if you do have a fear of being rejected, you can get some of that comfort back in your relationship. Or if you feel like there are boundaries that are not set, and the reason you're smothering is because you feel like that's the only way to control that the person follow those rules, you have to kind of go back and define what those boundaries are and make sure you're on the same page, and then learn to trust, right? Learn to trust again. And then the third one, and this goes with most issues in romantic relationship, is you have to learn to build your own self-confidence. A lot of times where this trust kind of falls apart, or the fear of rejection, comes from a lack of feeling like you are worthy of love, and worthy of love from specifically this woman in your life. And so if you're having an issue where you're like, I don't feel like I deserve it, you need to learn to explore what your contributions to the relationship are. Appreciate that you are worth it and that you are worthy of love, and from this person. And if you don't feel that way, that's where you probably do need to get some counseling, because that's something that we have to explore. Either you aren't worthy, right? And maybe you were at the beginning of the relationship, but you become complacent and you're not really the best husband or boyfriend. That happens. And so the answer is change it. Right? Become a great partner again. That is a very good prescription for having a good relationship. And then the other possibility is, something in your past, something about the patterns that have evolved and developed in your life have shown you that no matter what you do, you're not worth it. And that's not good, right? That is damaging to your progress in all areas of life. So whichever one it is, we have to kind of get to the root of it and kind of explain how to get past that. I hope this was helpful to you. My name's Dr. Jon Dabach, and I will see you next time.